What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to talk to you about Thor, War of the Pantheons. This is volume 16 of the Thor Epic Collection. This is Thor issues 383 through 400. This is written by Tom DeFalco with art by Ron Frenz. I got this specifically because this is what comes immediately after the Walt Simonson Thor run, which I liked okay. I really liked the beginning, and then I felt like that run kind of got weaker the longer it went on. But I was interested enough to see what is going to happen next. With a new creative team, are we going to do something interesting with some of the elements introduced in the Walt Simonson run, or are we going to do what often happens nowadays, where a new creative team comes on a character and they completely, almost a soft reboot, and they don't reference anything that happened in a previous run? I was curious to see which direction this series would go. And basically the plot is Seth, the Egyptian god of death, he wants to wage war against Asgard and the Norse gods. That is the plot of this book. It's a whole lot of issues, and you would think, okay, there's no way that it takes up this whole book. It kind of does. So for the first 3 issues, we don't actually get to see Thor in the present day. The first issue is a flashback set during the events of Secret Wars. And the back of this book says this is stuff from 87 to 89. Secret Wars was pre-85. I want to say it was 84 or maybe even 83. So right off the bat, we get a story that mostly focuses on the Enchantress, shows a little bit of what she was doing on Battle World during the Secret Wars event, and Thor is in that, but it's a past version of Thor. And then we get an issue that's one of the first times Thor met the Hulk. I don't know how it takes place in relation to the first issue of Avengers, but basically Thor says, hey, there's this guy who's hulking around and he's causing a lot of property damage. I'm going to fight him. And that's the issue. That issue might have been scripted by Jim Shooter, I'm not sure. And then the third issue is set in like the 25th century or something, and this corporation runs America, and then all the little people don't like that the corporation makes them work. And so this one guy, he picks up Thor's hammer, and then he tears down the corporation. And we get to see Loki is there. He's trying to help the corporation because he doesn't want Thor's hammer to make its way back to the real Thor. And then at the end of the issue, that guy, Dargo something, he throws the hammer so that it's eventually going to make its way back to Thor. So 3 issues right off the bat where it feels like filler issues. Whenever I start a new run on a book with a new character or a new creative team, I want to see what they are going to do that's different than what came before. I don't want 3 issues that feel like they could have been scripted at any time. Maybe you had this Secret War issue in the can for a while, and then maybe you were like, oh crap, Walt Simonson is leaving Thor, what do we do? Hey, we've got this issue that we wrote a while back, let's throw that in there to give us a little bit of time to figure out what to do next. Except that Tom DeFalco wrote at least 2 of these. I'm going to look and see if that Hulk issue, if Jim Shooter wrote that. But it feels like these 3 issues, Jim Shooter did the plot and Stan Lee did the script on that Hulk issue. But on the book itself, it only credits DeFalco and Friends. But anyway, so it feels like those 3 issues are fill-in issues that we're just going to do those right now until we can figure out the direction we want to take the series. And any one of these 3 issues would have been fine if you've been on this book for a year or 2 and you've already established the tone and the direction the series is going to go, and now we're going to do a little issue that shows what Enchantress was up to during Secret Wars, or we're going to show this future Thor guy, or we're going to have a flashback to when Thor first met Hulk or something like that. But doing all 3 of them in a row before we even know what's in store for the DeFalco Friends run, I didn't really like that. Then finally we get to present-day Thor following the events of the Walt Simonson run, and immediately I get the feeling that Tom DeFalco wants to undo a lot of the stuff that Walt Simonson did. Walt Simonson had changed Thor's look. He had more of a fancy-looking armor, and he had a big beard that he had grown at some point because Hela had scratched up his face, and he wanted to cover up the scars on his face. So right off the bat, DeFalco has Thor shave his beard because apparently the scars are gone now. now, and then within a few issues, Thor is back to wearing his old Silver Age costume, and it just feels to me like DeFalco said, I don't like any of that stuff, we're going to undo all of that. So that kind of rubs me the wrong way, but then Thor says, okay, I helped defeat this dragon, we had a little team-up story with the Celtic gods who traditionally hate us and we hate them, but now we kind of like each other. So then Thor says, I want to go back to Earth, but the Rainbow Bridge was destroyed during the Walt Simonson Thor run, so they try to teleport him to Earth, but because there is no connective tissue between Midgard and Asgard, now he gets teleported out in the middle of space. And then he ends up landing on this alien planet that the Celestials are about to destroy, and then he spends 2 or 3 issues trying to thwart their plans, and then he makes it to Earth, and then meanwhile, the Asgardians find out that Seth, the Egyptian god of death, plans to make war against Asgard, so they are going to try and warn Thor, except they can't teleport someone because the same thing will happen to them what happened to Thor. And so Thor is on Earth. He fights this guy called the Mongoose. He has a whole bunch of team-ups with a whole bunch of different Marvel Comics characters. I got the feeling reading this that Tom DeFalco was more interested in the Marvel Universe than he was Thor himself, because we have a team-up with Captain America, now called the Captain. He is no longer the Captain America. We have Spider-Man teaming up with Thor for a couple of issues, I think. We have Daredevil for about 3 issues, because eventually the Asgardians are able to send Hogan the Grim to Earth, and as soon as he makes it to Earth, he thinks that everyone he sees is a demon, so he is rampaging through New York City, and Daredevil's trying to stop him. And then we get an issue right in the middle of that where this screenwriter from Hollywood, she works for a production company that's trying to make a movie about Thor, and they're already well in debt because they've had to scrap the movie a couple times because they're trying to make it as realistic as it can be. And they have a big Thor costume that looks like what Thor was wearing in the Walt Simonson run. And then someone comes in and says, look, Thor has changed his costume again. And so they're like, oh, we're going to have to scrap everything because we want this to look and feel real. And so then this one guy, he tells the lady, why don't you try and rewrite the script for us while we're trying to figure this out here. So she goes and interviews all these people who have had dealings with Thor. And it eventually ends with her interviewing Jane Foster, who has a husband and a kid. I did not know that. Of course, I don't read a ton of Thor, but I know Jane Foster recently was holding the hammer and was calling herself Thor. What happened to her husband and kid? I'd like to know that. But anyway, this woman, she writes the script, and then the studio says, well, this is good, but now we've decided to go in a funny animal direction. And it's a fine little issue. It's fine once you have established, okay, here's what we're doing. We have Seth, the Egyptian god of death. He's about to make war on Asgard, and now we're going to do a little standalone issue. That was fine. I didn't mind that there. It's better than doing 3 fill-in issues at the beginning of the run. But Hogan the Grim, eventually he figures out, or he wakes up from his coma. But first, I forgot about these characters. Seth goes to these 3 people on death's door, and he gives them powers and says, I will basically give you guys life and extra powers, but you have to kill Hogan the Grim for me. And these guys, they call themselves the Earth Force. One of them can fly. One of them, he's got like rock powers, I think. They all kind of have elemental powers, sort of. One of them, this was really weird. One of them, I think her husband and her son died, so she had tried to commit suicide. And then Seth says, I will give you guys a new lease on life if you do this thing for me. And then after it mentions that she had tried to commit suicide, the rest of her appearances, she's always talking about how she's afraid of death. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If I was an evil god of death and I gave these people a new lease on life and I said, I want you to work for me or I will take life away from you, I probably wouldn't choose the woman who had tried to commit suicide because she will probably try to commit suicide again and I won't be able to count on her to do whatever needs to be done. Now that doesn't happen. After the book mentions that she tried to commit suicide, it doesn't touch on that again at all. And I wasn't expecting a book from the early 90s to deal with suicide in a meaningful way, but in that case, don't do it at all. But anyway, these guys, they try to kill Hogan, Thor has to fight them, and then they all realize this is wrong, we cannot do this. Even if Seth takes our powers away, we're not going to do what he wanted us to do. And then finally, Hogan wakes up from his coma and says, hey, Asgard is in danger. We need to get back to Asgard somehow. And so then, the last chunk of the book, I forgot, there's a period where Thor fights this woman who's made of sand, basically Sandman from Spider-Man, but it's a woman. She is protesting the building of this nuclear plant, and we are introduced to the guy who will eventually become the Marvel Comics hero Thunderstrike. And you can tell that DeFalco is planning on making this this guy be a big part of the Thor run. He doesn't do a whole lot here, but there is one point where Thor says to himself, I can sense that this man's destiny is going to be very tragic. And I know during the Black Galaxy saga, which takes place after all of this, that guy is Thor. He holds the hammer, and he is Thor, effectively. So I have no idea what happens in between this and the Black Galaxy saga, where the real Thor is no longer holding the hammer, and that guy, I think his name is Eric, I cannot remember, but he becomes Thor, and then a little while later, he becomes Thunderstrike, which is basically Diet Thor. But he's introduced here, and then Hogan says, we gotta get back to Asgard, and like I said, this book feels more interested in Marvel Comics cameos than it does actual Thor stuff, because we had the Captain America cameo, Spider-Man cameo, Daredevil for like 3 issues, a Hulk issue, and then Black Knight kind of shows up, and he says, well, I don't have anything going on, so I'll go with you guys to Asgard. And it keeps mentioning that Black Knight has this curse that is turning his body into the same material that his sword is made out of. And this book spends the last 5 issues of this run on the big war against Seth and the Egyptian gods. And it feels at least twice as long, because once you get into the actual battle with the Egyptian Pantheon, very little happens in each issue. It will be like 80% fight stuff, and then 1 plot point per issue. For example, at one point, Baldur, he doesn't know that Thor has made it back to Asgard and is fighting the Egyptian gods on the other side of Asgard. So he says, I'm going to push this button, and it's going to take all of Thor's extra power and give it to me so that I can fight these evil gods a little better. And Baldur, his hair was white during the Walt Simonson run. I don't know why. I don't remember how that happened. It might have had something to do with him dying and coming back to life. But when he takes Thor's powers, then it turns his hair back to the color brown. But then each issue will have like one thing happen, and then the other 15 pages of the issue will be fight stuff, and just fight stuff. They could have easily trimmed these last 5 issues down to 2 issues maybe, because the last issue is actually double size. So it could have been a lot less than 5 issues. And we do see Loki at one point. He is secretly helping Thor. I thought that was kind of cool. He is invisible. He doesn't want them to know that he's helping. I thought that was interesting. But then eventually, I forgot to mention that Hogan, while he was in a coma, Seth appeared to him in his dreams and said, I am putting the mark of death on you. And he like touches Hogan's cheek, and he says, the next time you and I meet, we are going to die. And at the very end of this book, it collects some interviews with some of the people who worked on this stretch of comics, and there was an assistant editor, I don't remember his name, but he was talking about some of the stuff that was coming with the big battle against Seth, and he said, Hogan has a death mark. That means Hogan is 100% going to die. He doesn't die. Hogan hears Black Knight say that he's cursed and that his body is becoming the same material as his sword, and there was some kind of prophecy about Seth dying of the sword or something. So Hogan literally picks up the Black Knight and throws him into Seth. That kills him. We get to see the return of Odin. He comes back. Thor fights Surtur a little bit. There's a whole lot of really epic stuff. The Celtic gods come in and help because Thor showed them that they don't have to be enemies. There's a whole lot of really epic stuff here, but it just feels kind of hollow. It feels like this whole 16 issues or so is leading up to this big battle against the Egyptian gods that didn't have to be as long and stretched out as it was. It doesn't feel like there is a whole lot of substance in the rest of the book. Probably my favorite issue, I'll see if I can find it, is one where Thor ends up teaming up with the Avengers, and that's where he finds out that Captain America, or the Captain, is kind of has a little bit of a tiff with Iron Man at this point. Something happened. Iron Man built a new shield for Steve, and then Steve found out that Iron Man was going to go and fight this government facility, invade this government facility, and I think that's a reference to the Armor Wars storyline. I have not read the Armor Wars storyline, but basically Steve said, Tony, don't do this, please. If you consider me a friend, don't do it. And Tony said, I'm going to do it. And so Steve said, I'm kind of upset with Tony right now. I'm going to go return the shield to him so that I don't consider, all our debts will be repaid. And I don't have the, here's the issue. Had it right there. That's the issue. I don't see the issue number was 390. That was probably my favorite issue. I really liked seeing Thor and Steve get to catch up here, and if anything, that issue actually made me interested in reading that little argument between Steve and Tony. I don't know if Steve shows up in the Armor Wars story. That might actually be a reference to something else entirely, but I think it's Tony trying to gather up all of his armor stuff that has fallen into other people's hands, and he doesn't want anyone else to have it. So I think that's the thing. This got me much more interested in reading that than reading anything else from the Tom DeFalco Thor run. And I have read the Black Galaxy Saga. I like parts of that, but overall, this was just a slog. I did not enjoy it like I thought I would. I was very curious at the beginning, and then about 2/3 of the way through, I was ready for it to be over, and with each issue, I felt like I had 100 more issues to go of nothing happening. It wasn't very good, in my opinion. Now, if you are a huge Thor fan, I can't say that it's bad. It's not a bad run. It's just not very good, in my opinion. So those are my thoughts on the War of the Pantheons. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, I will see you guys in the future with some more videos. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day.